everyone. A warm welcome to our Women Together Connect. It's Tuesday at noon, and we are in the height of summer in the Northern Hemisphere. So welcome for those of you who are joining in from the Northern Hemisphere and from the Southern, if there are any. Know that we are still joining in. So warm welcome to all who are able to join us today, both here in the Zoom room and in YouTube. It's lovely to see many familiar faces and a couple of new ones. A warm welcome if you're just joining us for the first time. My name is Antoinette, and I am the host of Women Together with a wonderful little team, our tiny team. And we love getting together on Tuesdays at noon, and part of the reason we get together is just to connect with ourselves a little bit more, to connect with each other. I'm just fixing my camera, it looks a little funny, and just to give ourselves a little bit of practice. Often we kind of I find that I move around in the world and in my day-to-day, and I sort of lose my breath. And apparently studies have shown that Americans actually only breathe with the top 10% of their lungs. So only, a small portion of even our lungs are we using on a day-to-day basis. So in some ways, what I feel is that this time is allowing us to come back to the breath and come back to our own sense of being here on planet Earth. So today, for our practice session, we thought we'd call it finding ground and just letting us land here, especially for those of us in summer right now. There's a lot of running around, there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of sunlight, so there's a lot of just sort of movement, constant going. And I think even last week we had just what would happen if we could slow down a little bit. What would that look like in our lives? And if we could just slow down for a moment, could we find ground again? So what I'd love is if we could just put a little, I see some of you are already doing it, little hellos in the chat, and greetings and sharing where you're coming from. It's always nice to know, especially as we do some finding of the ground, if we land here by just getting a sense of where we each are on planet Earth. So I'm sitting in what's known as Cortland Manor, Lenape land, in near the Hudson River, New York. And I see a few here from the West Coast, sunny Felton, California. Sometimes we share our weather because sometimes it's an internal weather, sometimes it's an external weather. There's always a weather system going on. So sometimes hot and muggy, sometimes cool as a cucumber. So I see a number of us here: Sweden, Toronto, Boston, Massachusetts, Winchester, Massachusetts, finally sunny Vermont. We hope that all of our friends in Vermont are doing okay after the deep flooding and storms. I see New Jersey, Lenape land, good to see you back. West Palm Beach, Florida, Tampa Bay, Florida, always warm here. We'll just send that our way. But lovely. Coming in from cloudy Toronto, Canada. Wonderful. Good. So it's just so good to be together, and that's really the point. But what I'd love to do is just invite us to land here for a moment, and then we'll do a little bit of a deeper landing practice. And then the best part about coming together is getting to connect with other women and getting to connect with each other, because we know when women come together, there's such an energy that starts to emerge when we can really connect and really deeply listen to each other. So we'll just do a first little practice, and then we'll go in a little deeper. So if you can, get your feet on the ground and just feel a sense of connection to the floor, maybe even to the seat that you're finding yourself on, or and feeling a bit of connection to just any point that your body touches the seat or the floor. Just feeling a sense of connectedness, and letting that be an entrance point to the breath. So just tuning your awareness and attention to the breath. Just noticing where the breath is today. Have you been running around today? Are you a bit breathless? Have you been resting? Or coming to us from a deeper meditation space? And wherever you are, just noticing, how is my body physically today? I'm not trying to fix or change anything, just noticing what's here. How is my body physically? How am I feeling mentally, emotionally? Even how's my spirit? Just connecting in and noticing right now, just noticing what's here. And when you're ready, reconnecting to your own intention. What brought you here? What brought you here? And then if you have a word or phrase, could be what brought you here to this Zoom meeting or something larger than that, and just type something into the chat, just sharing what brought you here. Beautiful ones here. Compassionate connection with authentic women, recharging and supportive community, a chance to forget my to-do list. These sessions uplifting and inspiring. Connection with other women, focus and chill. Always a learning space. Preparing for foot surgery on Thursday. Connection, seeking peace and connection. All these interesting and wonderful women who touch me. Wonderful. So before, oh, I see togetherness, looking at big changes, need my community. Good, Terry, I'm glad that you were able to make it today. the need to connect with women with open minds and hearts. Yes. So I thought I would share a little poem. It's by Peter Balakian. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's a poem called Here and Now. And I thought it might help us to just ground for a moment. What I love about it is the way it sort of opens up the senses. So my invitation is, as you listen to this poem, that you just invite your own senses. So just what you hear, what you see, what you sense, what you feel, maybe even what you smell. And just being very present with what comes up for you. So the poem is Here and Now. The day comes in strips of yellow glass over trees. When I tell you the day is a poem, I'm only talking to you, and only the sky is listening. The sky is listening. The sky is as hopeful as I am walking into the pomegranate seeds of the wind that whips up the seawall. If you want the poem to take on everything, walk into a hackberry tree, then walk out beyond the seawall. I'm not far from a room where Van Gogh was a patient, his head on a pillow, hearing the mistral careen off the seawall, hearing the fulvous leaves pelt the sarcophagi, here and now. The air of the tepidarium kissed my jaw, and pigeons ghosting in the blue loved me for a second before the wind broke branches and guttered into the river. What questions can I ask you? How will the sky answer the wind? The dawn isn't heartbreaking. The world isn't full of love. What questions can I ask you? How will the sky answer the wind? The dawn isn't heartbreaking. The world isn't full of love. I'll share the link to that poem found on the Poetry Foundation website. Oh, we did already, thank you. And just being with the here and now, and knowing that when we find ground, anything can happen after this moment, absolutely anything. The trees, the branches may break, the seawall may be, flooded. We don't know what's going to happen after this moment. And we know as much as we know about what happened before this one. So just being in the here and now, being fully here, being fully present in each moment. Just being with that. Thank you, Terry. I see Balakian. Thank you. Balakian is his last name. Beautiful. So just being with whatever may have come up with you, within you in that poem, and being with whatever may be coming up for you today. I'd like to invite you to grab a journal, just a paper and pen is fine. And just being here and now, noticing what is coming up for you. What is coming up after hearing that poem? What is coming up for you? And then perhaps starting a little conversation with yourself asking just, how is my mind today? How is my mind? So you could say, how are you, mind? And see what the response is. So you could write that down. How are you, mind? And see what the response is. And you can do that with any, I would call this a tiny practice of having a conversation with ourselves, but just, how are you, mind? And seeing what comes back. You can do this with a lot of different body parts too. But let's start with the mind. How are you, mind? And seeing what comes back. And then perhaps asking maybe any body parts. How are you, body? So you could have a little conversation with the body. And if there's specific areas, we've done this before, but if there's specific areas, hips, elbows, knees, shoulders, low back, if there are any areas that are maybe typically problem areas, aren't really today, maybe there's something that is a problem area, but just asking, how are you, body? And seeing what messages come up. How are you doing right now? And seeing what comes up. And then tuning in just for a moment, considering the emotional body. So the emotional body, if you thought of it almost like a underlay, like you have the way that the skin, sort of covers all the bones and all that. If you think of the emotional body as just being in there, connected, like fascia, like another layer, and asking the emotional body today, how are you doing today? How are you doing right now? Is there joy? Perhaps is there sadness? Is there anger, frustration? Just how are you doing today, right now, in the emotional body? And then just noticing each of these areas, we're going to just sit with what comes up and be with what's been coming up. And again, not trying to change anything, but we're just going to allow allow for a moment. And if there's an emotion, allowing ourselves to feel that. If there's a physical pain of some kind, allowing ourselves to actually feel and be with that. And physical pain can be a lot of different things. Often physical pain is, if it's chronic pain, it's a bit different because it's a consistent sensation that's happening over and over again. But often when we experience pain, it's something that happens briefly, and then that actually goes, it leaves us. But what happens is we remember it, and the memory of that pain, we hold on to it. And that happens often with grief too. We hold on to this feeling. And at times, especially with grief, it's because it connected us to that person. It connected us to what we lost. It may be the last piece of connection that we have to something that we lost. But often it doesn't allow us to fully live, to keep holding on to those things. And we stay kind of recycling the past. So part of the work that we do as human beings is almost like a washing machine. We put the dirty clothes in, we put the pain in, we put the emotional stuff, the grief, all of it, we put it in the washing machine, and the washing machine is the body, and we kind of shake it up and we let it do the work, and we put in the soap, the nutrients, the food, whatever it is we need, and we shake it up, move it around, let it keep moving through. And that's why a lot of people do physical practices, physical moving of the body, to allow, Leanne Mallory brought a lot of that in, to allow it to move through the body. Arowana Hayashi talks about the body doesn't want to stay stuck. So if we get into one of those embodiment positions of, let's say, the pain or the tension, we give it a little bit more and just stay with it. The body doesn't actually want to stay there. Something wants to shift. So we just allow whatever wants to happen to move through. And once it moves through, and often you see this with I was going to say kids, but I will say myself as well. When I don't want to cry, right? Like when I don't want to cry and I don't want to feel the feeling, I just kind of power through. And then it just builds up and it stays there. And I'll spend days trying not to feel and trying not to cry. And then it'll be something that just sets it off. And there it is, all of that stuff that I've been holding on to. So, and then once I move through, I cry, get it out, it goes. So just allowing ourselves for a few moments to be here right now with whatever is, and just allowing ourselves to be with ourselves, knowing that for me, having resources, having a group, having the care of others, knowing that we're in it together, that we're here in this human experience together, can be more of a resource than me sitting alone in my little space, trying to just feel my feelings or feel what's going on. So, yeah, with that, let's sit together for a few moments and just find our own ground here, find our own space in our own little room, in our own little, I talked about a weather pattern before, and just being with what is here, but also being with all of us here. So I like to have us on the gallery. It's sometimes nice to be able to see everybody if you're on Zoom. But wherever you are, you can find a comfortable seat. Take a deep breath. So just filling the belly, filling the chest and the collarbones, and then exhaling everything out. And then just feeling where the body lands. We'll take 2 more deep breaths. Inhale, filling the belly, filling the chest and the collarbones. And then exhale everything out. One more time. Filling the belly, giving yourself the space you need to really fill up the body, fill the breath. The collarbones, and release. And this time just following the breath inward, noticing if there's a stuck place. Place where there's any tension or sensation that's just asking to be felt today. Inviting perhaps the mind to just slow down, as if it was just an easy summer day where you're lying in the grass and watching the clouds go by overhead. Just noticing if there's any pain or any sensation in the body, in the emotional body, physical body. Just being with that. If something wants to move, letting it move. And just welcoming it in today instead of trying to override or do something else. Just letting it be here. If your thoughts start to drift, or your mind starts to follow the thoughts, just letting the thoughts go, returning back to the body, turning to the sensation of being here now and now and now. Noticing how much more spacious you may feel now. When we are grounded, we have capacity for so much more. When you're ready, you can reconnect with the screen. With each other. If you'd like to, if there's something still wanting to move, just giving it a space to do so. That we can let our bodies be the guide. And with a little bit more capacity, a little bit more presence, we'll turn to each other. So if you're here in Zoom, we will turn to one another and just share with each other, how are you today? How are you doing for real? So we'll turn to each other and we'll share. If you're here with us on YouTube, thank you so much for joining, and we will be letting you know when we're back in session in the website. But if you're here in Zoom, we're going to turn to each other and we will have a breakout for about 20 minutes. So we'll have some good time to share your name, where you're coming from, and how you're doing today. And maybe if there was anything before the practice we just did and after the practice, just sharing anything that may be up for you. And then we will return back here for a little dialogue and closing. So enjoy the time together. Remember, we don't know what the other person had for breakfast, let alone the rest of their life experience. So just being caring and kind to each other today. Enjoy the time. We'll see you back in 20 minutes.